Okay, great. Thanks, Sam. So you both brought up trust and skepticism, and I kind of want to put that in the framework of best training practices. So as educators, as someone who's training doctoral students, Sam, like how are you dealing with, or how do you see the doctoral students or your lab members dealing with things like, cultural biases in the training data sets? Gender biases. I just saw this paper recently about how if you're asking ChatGPT to generate a recommendation letter, someone's career depends on that, and they're introducing gender biases in those, and that's what I actually see people coming to me at the academic writing center. They're saying, I don't want to write that recommendation letter, so I just asked ChatGPT to do it. Like, uh-oh. So could you speak a little bit to that side of the coin and how that is affecting training and output? And
so I would say, okay, so on one side, on the level of training, right, one of our jobs is to ensure that students are aware of what's going on, right? Like the thing is that we could easily try to pretend that these things don't exist and are not happening, right? We could say, right, don't talk about ChatGPT. You're not allowed to use it. Don't mention it in class. Don't mention it during the discussions. It's forbidden, and so on. That's fine. You could set some line in the sand that you want to draw on these things, but in fact, we're probably doing more harm than good, right? Like pretending that these tools don't exist, pretending that the skill sets involved with writing adequate prompts for being able to extract useful information from generative models is an important skill set. So we need to be aware and need to make sure that the students that we're dealing with are familiar with these things, that they're able to adapt to them and be able to obviously and most likely outgrow us in their ability to use these tools. So that's one side. I would say on the ethical side, this is somewhere that I feel like at least in the scientific domain, that often we're a little bit behind the times when it comes to worrying about these things, about discrimination and biases and so on, because we still have a lot of issues with one, the way we interpret non-native English speakers' work, in appreciating the quality of the work that they've done. Gender bias is a huge issue still in academia, and one that is far from being solved. So it's not surprising that generative models pick up on these biases, right? Like the bias is there. It's embedded in the training data that it's sampling from, and it's embedded for a reason, right? It's a systematic generation of content that is producing these biases, right? So we can point our finger at the model saying, I think a very clear example has been face recognition software. There's been a very clear demonstration that, depending on your skin tone and background, facial recognition software has a very biased, ability to work in certain circumstances, or, a very targeted selection of people that it's looking for, and things like this that are very disturbing. But it's not the fault of the tool, right? Like the tool isn't generating this bias. The bias is coming from where it's getting the data from the people that's producing the data, from the society that's producing, this structure. So I feel like this is something that we're not at all well adapted to deal with at the moment. I would say that for writing recommendation letters, I would say that we would all probably still strongly recommend that this is something that's been done by hand by senior researchers, because as you said, it has a huge impact on people's lives. And this trust issue and the skepticism still, I think, like I said, still in a high state, and we wouldn't want to offload that those important decisions to something we're not quite sure what we're going to get out.
Okay, great. Bethany, do you have some input?
Oh, I was just going to say that what Sam was saying, that I sort of put actually in the chat box already, because I was reading about it this morning in the New York Times, is about facial recognition, but also about any kind of issues on the subject. Just makes regulation, like the EU is grappling with this right now with regulations, and I hear this a lot also even with my students who are saying, why doesn't the EU just regulate it? So I hear this a lot. Why don't we just? Oh boy, and it is way harder said than done, because it's way harder to do that than to just do it. First of all, you have to make sure that those policymakers actually show up to the meeting. That showed up in the article this morning, and I thought that was very telling. And you also have to make sure that those policymakers have the necessary skills and sort of background knowledge in order to be able to handle the cognitive load of computer science. And not all of them do. I mean, even I myself don't even have I'm going to raise my hand. I don't have a computer science background. But I've been bathing in it long enough to find it like really, really fascinating. But that's not always all the case with our policymakers in the EU and in the US and you know, across the world. And so sometimes I kind of joke with my students, half jokingly, please go into politics because we need more informed policymakers in the area of computer science. That's really a comment that just to dovetail with what Sam was saying.
Okay. So then what do you, I'm going to pose this question before I go to our audience and they can do a little Q&A. So how do you think generative AI is actually impacting the skill sets of our future engineers, our future academics? Because, you know, there's something to be said for that. As you're writing, the serendipity of realizing an idea, and if you're asking ChatGPT to, oh, I'll just have it generate my abstract because I don't have time for that, or something similar, you're kind of losing that sort of process, some would argue. So I wonder if you could also speak to that, that writing craft and how it actually, it's the whole reason why writing became indication, Sam, as you say, of your intellectual expertise. You have to have proof, right? And you can't just say something and you're an expert. You have to provide that argument. And the way we do that is by writing it down. So I'll start with Bethany this time. Could you speak to that?
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. You know, it's interesting because one of the things that I wanted to mention today was that that what we're seeing in the research for generative AI is this very, very rapid trend towards personalization. And a lot of the PhD students and specialized master's students and even engineering students, right now, when I would say right now, December 6, 2023, they're still saying, well, I don't like it because I lose my voice. I don't have my voice in it. But I think it's because they haven't actually mastered how to use it. There is a way that you can, you know, incorporate a more personalized touch into even the free versions of the different. And I'm not talking about just ChatGPT, but I'm talking about Bard. I'm talking about other LLMs. And if they know how to play around with those and feed it their own work, then what it can do is it can adapt to their own voice. And so the whole argument that I hear a lot, which is, oh, I think I'm going to lose I won't have my own voice in whatever it produces, just means you just don't know how to use it. And it will get more and more personalized in the months to come. Also, if you let it if you let it steal your voice, then maybe you should be stepping back and not using it as much. I mean, this is a choice. You have a choice to make, and I think that what's nice about it is that it gives researchers and it gives PhD students the choice to play around with it and see what happens. But if it really does to take your voice, and I've worked with PhD students who just say, no, I really don't want to use it because it just really just robs me of my own personal aesthetic as a writer. I get that. I totally get that, and I respect that. As a proofreader, because I also proofread a lot of articles here at Telecom Paris of our researchers and our PhD students, and those who come to me and I say, "Have you used any LLMs with this?" And they say, "Well, only on small portions. That's fine." Whereas then with another researcher, recently, over the summer, I worked on his article. He used 3 separate LLMs to proofread his article, and it was absolutely perfect. So I think that we have to take a kind of personalized approach ourselves as educators with the individuals that we work with. And one final comment about all of this is that one huge criticism I hear from a lot of educators is that ChatGPT will rob our students of their critical thinking skills. Like I said, I'm in group 3, and we don't have any research to back that up yet. Okay, so before you go on and saying that it's gonna rob our students or rob ourselves of our our children, our students of their critical thinking skills, why don't you back that up with some hardcore research, or why don't you conduct some research yourself on the matter? I would love to read that paper. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you.
Right, fantastic points, Bethany. So I think I can make kind of a two-sided argument on this one. So I remember when I was a PhD student, the many things that I learned from my supervisor and senior researchers in the lab that, I didn't know that I didn't know, right? Like these unknown unknowns, the things that you learn, by experience, that you really need, this environment of education to teach you these skills. But then other things that I learned by myself, going on the internet, reading, and so on. And you quickly develop certain skills that your professors and supervisors don't have, and you can demonstrate, new ways to do things that they never thought about. And the problem is, of course, the older researchers will always be skeptical because they're used to doing things their way. Right. And the thing is that I'm already starting to see this in myself, that I'm getting used to doing things my way. So when students come in, I'm like, you need to learn to do it this way. And then they'll come along and show me a better way of doing it. And then I'm like, oh, right. And this is, it's a kind of classical dynamic that we will always experience, right? Like, this is going to be the case that, it's likely that we, some of us, the older people on this call, will be starting to think, oh, we're very skeptical about what we're losing by using these sort of tools, because when I was a student, I did it this way. I had to go through the hard way. I walked through a mile of snow in the cold and did it this way. And that's how I learned how to be a good researcher. But we might soon discover that they're younger people are very clever too, right? That they come up with new ways to use tools that we never envisioned, we never thought possible, and we're not even sure what they can take from these new skills that we never even contemplated. So I think another side of the coin though is that there's a lot of study that's been done in neuroscience that demonstrates that the way our brains work is very much linked. The way we think is very much linked to language centers and how when we develop, what languages we learn at birth, right? If you talk to people from different countries, someone born in Canada speaking English or French, and maybe somebody who grew up speaking Telugu or something like this, the intrinsic way that they think about the world and the universe around them is related to the words they learn to express those things and thoughts and concepts. So it'll be interesting is to kind of in a more sci-fi way try to imagine a world where we move away from natural languages and into generative algorithms, where we learn more about prompts and syntax, computational syntax, than we do about pronouns and prepositions. How this might impact the way we think about the universe, and this is an open-ended question that we can't possibly know the answer to.
That's really interesting that you said that, because I just read a paper about the biases that are occurring in generative AI depending on voice, and not voice as in personal style, but voice of second language learners. And so how AI would recommend that this was from a Chinese versus this is from a Scottish speaker versus this, and that. And in some cases, it was picking up on the different, mistakes or errors that are made compared to standard academic English. So that's already sort of the beginnings of research looking into that particular area. So it's really interesting that you brought that up.